Brian, thank you for being on the Path Pavers Podcast.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me.
Cool. Well, today we're going to have, obviously, I think you'll be a familiar guest on this podcast as we partner together and we do a lot of cool stuff. But today, I think I want to just talk about your journey because it's very interesting.
Yeah.
You're an entrepreneur, to say the least, and your skill set is that of what I would consider a path paver. In other words, a maverick. It's very complex, dynamic. If we looked at your resume, it would make no sense at all.
Right.
Right? If you tried
agree.
to get, hired by a more traditional employer,
Yeah.
they would not talk to you.
Most
and
likely
these are
not.
my favorite kind of people, right?
Yeah.
Because I think most people, when they take their own authentic journey. So my favorite quote, is by Emerson, is like, don't follow a path, leave a trail.
I like that.
And so that's what the Path Pavers Podcast is about. The people who leave a trail, who do things not necessarily in their own way as like a rebellious act, but do things in their own way as an authentic expression of who they are, right? And in sports, we see this often, like Steph Curry plays basketball like Steph Curry,
Right.
right? Like Jordan played basketball like Jordan.
Yep.
Now, you can be inspired by them, right? And
Yes.
then take what you learn. I mean, Steph Curry changed the game of how you shoot a three-pointer. Jordan changed the game of like kind of how you approach it from a competitive nature, among other things,
Sure.
right? But that's what I love. I love the individuals who are inspired by people,
Yeah.
but don't try to imitate them.
Yeah. No
And
doubt.
then they express themselves authentically. And that's why you're on this podcast, because I think that you've been inspired by people, but through experience, you've earned the lessons, that can only be learned through experience.
Absolutely.
And have become someone now that's incredibly invaluable in every context of every situation, right? Because some people are only valuable in certain situations.
Right.
And I think that's kind of like that traditional career path that narrows. And there's other individuals who become valuable no matter what the situation,
Yeah.
given their profession.
Yeah.
So to start off with, what is your profession if you had to describe it?
Yeah. So honestly, I just consider myself a businessman, an entrepreneur. I have a background in sales, background in marketing, but I've used that to leverage, the use of other businesses, primarily service-based businesses is what I would say I've had the most success in. So I've worked in a number of different industries. Whenever I talk to people about my past, they always laugh. They're like, and how old are you? Like, you're 35. And I laugh too, because it seems like I've lived this whole lifetime because I have been in so many different industries and worked for so many different companies and helped so many different companies and had so many different experiences, which I think is a key takeaway in our conversation today, is that I think a lot of times people don't take on as many opportunities as they should, because every opportunity is just a chance to learn. Sometimes people are scared, so they don't want to take it on because it's not something they know or they're comfortable with. But getting outside your comfort zone, I think, is huge. But yeah, I would say, if you really want to make it a simple answer, it would be, sales and marketing would be my background and kind of my pathway to where I am today.
And how do you approach sales and marketing from maybe a different perspective than normal, right? Or traditional?
Yeah. So I know my background, and we've talked, off the camera a little bit about this, but I did door-to-door for 3 years and I ran door-to-door teams. So I always joke with people about the fact that going door-to-door is almost like getting a master's degree in sales, because it is, of course, the most difficult type of sales, but you really, really learn how to work hard, for one, because you start at zero every day. So when you work in door-to-door, there's no base salary, right? Like, you're straight commission, you eat what you kill. So you got to learn how to work hard, work quickly, work efficiently. When I did door-to-door, we had to do 200 contacts a day, 200 cold contacts a day. That was the only way you're going to be successful. We had kind of developed a law of averages that worked, and it was based off 200 cold contacts a day. So to talk to 200 people in an 8-hour day, most people don't ever do that. So, learning that frequency of how to work and how to just pursue leads that way, I think really developed kind of the style that I have today. And I learned really quickly that people want to do business with you, but you have to make it easy to do business with you, right? And I think that is something that a lot of businesses can need to consider, right? So I always try to make it extremely easy to do business, where sometimes in one of my organizations, people will actually like message me and be like, is this legit? because this was too easy. Like every other company that I contacted, they needed this, 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 and this. And I'm like, yeah, we don't need all that. Like we'll be there Saturday at 10 o'clock or whatever. So making it extremely easy where almost like your customers are just so taken back by it because it's so much different than everybody else in the industry will really separate it. I don't think that you need to be in sales, this overly salesy guy, right? Like you just have to learn how to talk to people, learn how to read social cues. Don't waste time with people that aren't interested. Like don't try to sell somebody that doesn't want your product. Just hone in on the people that do, and then capture as much business as you can from that person, because somebody who likes your product most likely likes you, and that's what they're buying. And if they like you and they've already developed trust in you, then maximize that instead of just trying to sell to 50 different people. Build 5 quality relationships and then maximize those relationships.
It's simple in theory, but very hard in practice, right?
For sure.
And part of your story that resonates is the reps.
Mm-hmm.
So in your first 3 years, you're in door-to-door sales, you get an ungodly amount of reps.
For sure.
And I think through those reps, you create a level of intuition.
Yeah.
Right? A kind of like a feel.
Yes.
And I think then it makes what you said really easy. So part of my takeaway from your experience and your story is in the beginning, it's about reps.
Yeah.
Right? No different than like a chef, right?
Yeah.
It's like, how do you cook the perfect steak? Well, cook 400 of them.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Like,
right. Yeah.
Because you'll find that sometimes you fail, but you did nothing wrong.
Right.
Like you executed everything perfectly.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I can make this comparison like in golf. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but like somebody will have a putt.
Sure.
And they'll roll the ball. Like they'll have it through like a roll and drop the ball, and it'll go 3 different places.
Yes.
So it's like you could hit the perfect putt, do everything right, and it won't go in. And I think that's similar, like in sales or business, you could do everything right.
Yes.
But you don't know if you did something right or wrong until you get enough reps, right?
For sure.
So it's like, I did this 5 times, 4 to 5 times it worked out, but that first time I did it, it didn't work out. And so that's why you can't just stop in one rep or one strategy. And I think that's where your marketing comes in. That's really, I think, intriguing.
Sure.
Is that you test a lot of different things.
Yes.
To find out what makes the most sense.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think the caveat to a lot of reps too is, and I would see this all the time in sales training, is that when you get really comfortable, a lot of times you'll backslide and you'll start doing bad habits.
How so?
Like you do a ton of reps, you get so comfortable, you stop remembering the little things that got you there. So I would notice with door-to-door guys back in the day, I would notice that, after 6 months or so, they would be like, man, I'm in like a slump. And then I would go out with them and I'd retrain them. And I'm like, yeah, it's because you're not doing what you've always done to get there. Because you've had, during the course of all those reps, you get these like little mini instances where something else works. And so you start trying to do something else. And so the one thing that I found that kept me really sharp in the midst of being in a very high frequency industry like that was training people. Because of training, I had to teach it, and I had to teach it over and over again. And so I always did everything like very almost to the book and standardized to like what my process was that I taught guys. So, if we were selling a product door to door, we would literally create a process. We kind of had a framework that we knew worked, and then we would, customize that to the customer, and we would use that process over and over and over again. And again, it's just very easy to deviate from that slightly when you do it so much, because you get, these times where maybe you did have to deviate slightly, you felt like, to make the sale, and you almost got like a false positive from that. Right. And so just teaching that, I think, really, really helped. But I think that's what's really cool about what you guys are doing with creative hiring, because you guys can take your process, your framework, and really customize it to like whatever business it really and it works for pretty much every business.
Yeah, like what you're talking about resonates with me, because I look at it like creative constraints.
Sure.
Right. And I think that if you have no constraints, kind of like in chaos. I mean, it's overwhelming.
Sure.
It's almost like if I were to sit down with a blank piece of paper and have zero inspiration or ideas, you're just like, oh my God, how am I going to write 30,000 words or whatever,
Yeah.
But it's like, if you sit down and I give myself the constraints, I'm going to write 1,200 words,
mm-hmm.
and I'm going to give myself 2 hours.
Yep.
And I learned this, I think it was Tarantino that was talking about this, or another author. And he's like, listen, I got 2 hours.
Yeah.
In those 2 hours, I can either write or do nothing.
Right.
And then over time, the boredom, you're just like, I'd rather write.
You
know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
And I love that idea. Like, that's like a constraint, but it constrains you in a way that kind of like encourages you to do it. And so like when you have a process, my caveat with certain processes is like, does it restrict you, right? And make you imitate where everyone has to operate the exact same way?
Right. Or
does your creative constraint still allow you to,
yeah,
be fluid in a sense? You know what I mean?
No,
it's
for sure.
Like in anything, it's like if you can't have enough autonomy to do it in a way that is disproportionately you, then you're just going to imitate everybody else, right? Or imitate whatever the process or system is. And I think that's where I think traditional hiring or traditional professional work is boring.
For sure.
And I think that's where people like check in and check out.
Yeah.
Because it's so routine.
Yep.
It's so the same every day. No one's different. It's all the exact same.
You're just checking boxes.
And I think then you don't feel like you have no relationship with your profession. Yeah. Because it's not it, right?
Yeah.
And so I love the idea of, and then creative hiring is all about creative constraints that are built around the constraints that you dictate.
Yeah.
Like for me, like my creative constraints when I'm hiring are going to be different than yours.
Right.
Because we're in totally different professions. We have different preferences.
Exactly.
We're different people.
Yeah.
So it should be.
For sure.
And I always describe it this way. Like you can buy a suit 3 ways, right?
Yeah.
You can go to, Men's Warehouse, get it off the rack.
Yep.
You can go to Nordstrom, get it off the rack and get it tailored. Or you can go to like a bespoke tailor, pick out the cloth. He's going to measure you, and that suit is built for you.
They're going to measure you 10, 12 times
100%.
As your body fluctuates, and then it's the perfect suit. Yeah.
And then you can make alterations. Like me, like I like my left side to be a little shorter for my watch.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Yep. So then you can customize little things. Yep. And that's what I think hiring should be. It should be the bespoke tailor.
Yes.
While the suit's going to look similar to other suits, it's going to fit differently.
Yeah.
And when it fits differently, you wear it better, right? And then if you wear it better, obviously, like it's more of an enjoyable experience, for everybody. And I think that's something you hit on, like the experience aspect of it.
For sure. And, I would say in, what I do with sales and marketing, it's very similar. Like I have some minor constraints, like we have a process, but I feel like in the marketing industry, especially, so many people, they do the same thing for every business, and you get this very like outside the box product. And it will work really well for some businesses, but not well for others. And so you have to get creative. You have to get innovative with it. You really have to like learn the industry, learn the product, and you just can't be lazy with it. That's the key. Like you always have to be working on it. And I think when I was doing sales, one of the main things that I would always do, because as I mentioned, I trained people a lot, is I would always have them like ride with me, but I would have them ride with other people that set the pace too, because they did stuff within our same framework. They were different than me. Like maybe their pace, their pitch, their tone, their voice inflection was just different. And so it's like, I want you to ride with me, but I also want you to ride with this guy and this guy and this guy. And I want you to develop your own by seeing like how everybody else is a little different. You might take a little something from me, a little something from him. And then at the end, I want it to be you. And kind of, as you mentioned in the beginning, like you're taking inspiration from other people, but at the end of the day, like you need to have your own style. And seeing other people's individuality in style, in things like sales and things like marketing or hiring, I think is of the utmost important to really just differentiate yourself in the marketplace. Like it's such a competitive marketplace now. And I think so many times people think like, oh, I have to do something so crazy or outlandish. There's nothing new under the sun, man. You don't. You just have to do something. Like if you're in an industry, you don't always have to like create a new industry. Sometimes you need to, but like you just need to do it better than everybody else in that industry. Like you don't need to always come up with some new concept. It's just doing it differently and better than other people is equally as effective and innovative as starting something completely brand new, inventing something, if you will.
Mm-hmm. What's fun? You can play with that idea like better.
Yeah. And
like the better can be a subjective measurement in many ways.
For sure.
Right. So like for me, I was in the recruiting and staffing industry for a long time. And like for me, those aren't my competitors, because I'm never gonna do what they do better than them,
Right.
or at that scale or at that level. But what I will do, better subjectively, is find talent that most people will overlook. You know what I'm saying? And so it's
Yes.
like when you say better, it's like this is where that individuality or that authentic, um, I guess, relationship to whatever your profession is. Like, what is your subjective measurement of better?
Right.
Right? You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah.
Like set your measurements
Sure.
and then hold yourself accountable to them. Right? Like for
100%.
me now, and you know this, like I think what you hit is like first start with as many reps as possible.
Yep.
After that, get you call them mentors, or you
Yeah.
can have like people who inspire you that are doing whatever that profession is, so you can get inspired by different styles.
Yeah.
So reps, mentors, and that final piece is like, what do you predispositionally value?
Yeah.
Right? And like
For
what's
sure.
important to you from a character or an ethical or moral standpoint. And then those should be your measurements,
Yeah.
right? Like for me in my profession now, like my measurement is interesting work.
Yeah.
Like that is really high for me. So,
Yeah.
but in the past it might be financial,
Right.
because I needed to make money to pay, certain things. And
Yeah.
so, which is a total fine measurement. I have no problem. I think money's an important tool, but now it'd be quality and interest of work. That's going to be a highly subjective measurement for me. And then also dynamic and complexity of the opportunity.
Totally.
Because I want the opportunities that no one else can do.
Right.
Because that's going to test me.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Because you think about like, this is what I love about like some of the and I study talent in across industries, professions. And so like, I'll look at like boxers, because to me, it's really interesting. And I love the boxers that don't care about their record
Sure.
as much as fighting the best fighters.
Yes, exactly.
I love those guys.
Right.
Right. But, and that just shows that their measurement is, when it's all said and done, I don't care about having a zero on the loss. I care about who I fought.
Right.
And to me, that's cool. That's more of an interesting collection.
They're testing their intestinal fortitude, if you will.
Yeah. Like I was watching last night. I don't know if you remember this fight. I never heard of it. It was like Gotti and Ward.
Okay.
They had a trilogy fight, 3 fights. It was like uncomfortable. Like these guys went at it. Like it was 3 different fights, 10 rounds. Warriors. I mean, Gotti in the last fight, I'm pretty sure broke his hand.
Jeez, man.
In the 4th or 5th round, it was still boxed at 10th
Still
round.
going. Yeah.
So it's like you see that, and they ran it
For
back
sure.
and they ran it back and they ran it back. And it wasn't about chasing belts or titles, which again, like if that's your subjective measurement,
Right.
like a Floyd, that's fine.
Yeah.
Like
for
that's
sure.
cool. That was like he delivered his legacy. He can now sit on the throne.
Yeah.
But like someone else like a Lomachenko, he wants to be an undisputed champion. And so like his losses, he's like, I don't care about the losses because my subjective measurement of success is undisputed.
For sure.
Floyd's was being undefeated.
Yep.
Which are a little bit different. Yours is, something different as well.
Sure.
So like what would you say now after all your experience? What is your subjective measurement of success?
Honestly, just being uncomfortable as much as possible. I know it sounds crazy, but
That does sound a little crazy.
it is. But what I've noticed is like when I've had success, so like when you grow a company and you build it, it's really easy to get comfortable. Like, hey man, we're killing it. We've got this process. The leads are coming in. Our sales process is dialed in. It's so easy to just want to like hang out in that zone because everything's going right. And you just have to constantly be thinking like, how can we get to the next level? And that's not always a very natural progression for people, especially people who come from a background. Like I didn't grow up with a ton. So when I'm having success, I'm like, oh man, this is sweet. Like I've made it. And the minute you think you've made it, I think is a very dangerous point in time.
So what makes you uncomfortable now?
Honestly, doing podcasts. No, I'm just kidding. This is all pretty new to me though, right? Like video stuff, like it's outside of my comfort zone a little bit. So this is great. So yeah, this is outside of my comfort zone as an example. But I recently left a company and that was really uncomfortable. Like I was very comfortable there and I could have stayed there and I could have made a very comfortable living. I had ownership equity in the company, but I chose to leave for a multitude of different reasons. And a big reason was like, I knew that I needed to get uncomfortable again. Like I knew that I needed to go out into the wilderness and I needed to like completely build something on my own, go through some struggles, get uncomfortable, learn things that I wasn't learning while I was there. You get so dialed into like what your responsibilities are there, and you're not honing any new expertise. Like you're not growing in any way because you're just so comfortable within those. Like I felt like I could go to work every day. I could go to my business and do it in my sleep. I could do it if I was hungover. I could do it. And that's a dangerous place to be in because you got to be able to challenge yourself every day. And I just didn't have that there.
I love that. And that's really kind of where like the idea of Path Pavers originated from, is like idea that like you kind of have to pave your own path. And I mean, I guess the original idea, it's not my idea, right? Like definitely just stole this from way smarter people than me. But like there's a story in King Arthur and his knights where they were searching for the Holy Grail, and each knight entered the forest where they deemed it darkest.
Yeah.
And I love that idea. So like what's uncomfortable for you, maybe it's not uncomfortable for me.
Right.
Right. And so like you have to dictate that and enter the forest where you feel is dark. And then like you said, like through there, if you follow a path, well, it's going to lead you maybe to not to where you want to go.
Yeah, exactly.
And so then if you follow a path too long,
right,
or you depend on a paved path for too long, then you lose agency to deviate from the path. Because you don't have the skill set or the abilities.
Yes.
And I've noticed this with some professionals I work with, where like they follow this structured, nicely outlined, crisp paved path, where I do this, and I get promoted to this, and then I do this, and then I do this. But we forget to realize like that path narrows with time.
For sure.
And then all of a sudden you naturally might not fit it.
Correct.
And then if you don't fit it, then what?
Then what do you do then?
And you don't have the agency to pave your own because you haven't developed the skill set, because you've been uncomfortable.
Correct.
Right. And I think that I totally agree, with that idea that if you don't acknowledge the importance of being uncomfortable, and you can use different words too, trying something new. Maybe that's not uncomfortable to somebody, but
exactly
avoiding
complacency.
I guess that you could, I mean, the words I think are limitless you could use,
and that's really what
the idea behind it.
It's new experience, right? Like if every day you're going out and you're doing the same thing, it's tough to grow. You'll grow pretty much as far as you can at some point. Like you get better and better at what you do. And that's, I think, I don't want to undermine that. I think that's super important. If you're locked into something, you got to be growing that and becoming the best you possibly can at it. That's super, super important. But you have to take on new experiences to grow, right? So I think, that's really what I mean by it, is just putting myself in new situations, new experiences. Everything is so fast paced. So everything is changing all the time. And so if you're not keeping up with that, you're going to fall behind in business for sure.
I love it. I think I like that. That's the best way to put it. Like you need to collect or like seek new experience.
Yes.
Right. In that way.
Yeah, for sure.
At the end of the day, it's like, that's what, I always say, like, the goal of life, I think, is to be the most authentic person you can. Right.
Yes.
But to also like just become interesting.
For sure.
You know what I mean? At the end of the day, like, if you're wealthy, that's great.
Yeah.
Again, like I have no problem, but like, it's the interesting people that
No,
you know what I mean? And yes, many times people who are really interesting cultivate wealth.
For sure.
Because they voyage or they did a journey, they did something that most people wouldn't do. So they have an interesting story, and then you're compensated for it.
Yeah, and they're charismatic typically.
Right. But I love that idea. And so if you had to give other people, because I think we're in an interesting time frame now where we have unprecedented opportunity and optionality to engage in professional work that you deem interesting. Yeah. Right. And interesting to me is something that maybe provides meaning. For sure. Right. That gives you maybe your life purpose or fulfillment. For sure. I'm definitely not on this bandwagon of like work as minimum as possible, like create all this passive income. Right. And then just like be on a beach somewhere or do this. I think professional work is important. I'm not saying you should sacrifice your family for it or your, or yourself for it. Right. But I think that trying to have it be a transaction or a necessary evil is not the right attitude to have. I agree. So if you're going to give anyone advice that is either searching for a profession that provides meaning, fulfillment, or purpose, or is just starting, what are some things that you would advise them to do?
I would say embrace the journey that you're on, for sure, and be like very reflective of that every single day. Because I think it's very easy just to have a job, punch in, not really think about it at the end of the day, punch out, go home, get lost in social media, get lost in whatever the case may be, but be very purposeful, very reflective about your day, and embrace the process that you're in right now. Because if you're not thinking about it, if you're not reflecting on it, like, you won't grow, right? And you won't find out what you're passionate about or what the next opportunity might be. Like, you're going to miss those opportunities when they come into your life. So I think that would be the biggest thing. I think the biggest issue that I see today because of things like social media is that a lot of people, they think like, I want to get really wealthy, but they don't want to do what it takes to get there. They see like these, influencers that portray a certain lifestyle, like you said, maybe like, oh, I'm making passive income, I'm on the beach, I'm traveling, I'm doing all these things. They didn't see all the hard work that it took that guy to get there. Like, that guy didn't just get to that point by, messing around. Like, he probably created a ton of content, like sat down and figured out what works, what didn't work, like probably 18 hours a day sometimes or more. And they didn't see that journey. So I think we kind of have this false representation that people think like, oh man, I really just want to get there. But that, like, making money or getting fame or whatever it is not the real treat, right? Like, that's not the real end goal. The end goal should be the process. So like, embracing that process, embracing the difficult times and the wonderful times, learning from that, because at the end of the day, and we were talking about this earlier off camera, but at the end of the day, like, if you lost everything and you were the person that embraced the journey, you could start over and just redo it all over again. Making $1 million shouldn't be the prize. The prize is the journey, right? The prize is the journey that you have, the experiences that you have. That's what will allow you to just like duplicate it over and over again and basically make you impenetrable, right? So that would be my biggest piece of advice, would be embrace the journey wherever you're at, and allow that, and then be reflective of that and allow that to propel you in the right direction. Don't just be like, oh man, I have this really crummy job right now. Like, okay, cool. Like, how can you get better at that job? You got to think. So if it's like a very simple job and you're going in, you feel like you're just punching in and punching out, like, play a game with yourself about it, right? Like, how can I be more efficient at this? How can I do this better within the confines of my job? Think outside the box, challenge yourself that way. That, I think, will help you to gain a confidence, but also just start experiencing a journey where you're growing.
That was perfect. I got nothing to add to that.
Yeah.
So that was great. Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah,
I'm
man.
Sure you'll
thank
be
you for
on
having
again.
me. Yeah, for sure.
And no, I think what you said was perfect. So
cool, man. No, thank you guys for having me.
I'm not going to ruin it by adding anything else.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.